everybody. Happy whatever the hell day it is, day 9,077 of our quarantine. Hi, David. Hi. Hi, everybody. So it's so good to be back and have a voice. I worked myself into a little bit of a tizzy and got strep throat. And now I know you guys are wondering, how could she get strep throat in the middle of a quarantine? Well, I got strep throat because I carry strep throat all the time. Hello. Hi.
Hello.
So I'm telling everybody how I had strep throat. And I know
Oh no.
like, how do you get strep throat in the middle of quarantine? And you do that by carrying strep throat all the time. Which I carry it all the time. And I just ran myself down, working like an animal and like staying up late and not sleeping enough. And then I got strep throat. And it literally went from like 0 to a million. Like my throat was like ridiculous. I couldn't talk. I had a fever. It was bad. So that today is like the first day that I have like some semblance of a normal voice and like normal like energy. Like even yesterday, I think I still had fever, but now I'm good. So medicine, those big ass horse pill penicillins are miracle workers. And so thank God being able to get to the doctor. But I have to tell you that going to the doctor in the middle of this coronavirus is a little bit like going to a speakeasy.
Oh
no. So like literally I had to like wear my mask. I had to go up to the doctor, call the doctor from outside the door, announce my arrival, and then wait in my car and wait for my doctor to call me my cell phone so that I could go back and get let in.
Oh no. Well, at least you got in and got your penicillin.
Oh my gosh. Like she was literally like, "What's wrong?" She has like awesome accent. And I'm like, "Yeah, I have strep. I definitely know I have strep." And of course, you know, like everybody in my life is like bugging out because I have fever. And they're like, "You have the Rona." I'm pretty sure, like most people, that like the anecdotal reports that I've heard about the corona was that like it feels like something you've never had before. And I was like, this is strep throat. I've had this before. Like, this is so familiar to me. I'm like, it's definitely strep. So anyway, you look very beautiful tonight, Fairlie.
Thank you.
I'm just happy to be sitting and having a conversation. So I'm making au natural. It is what it is. Best of you. Everybody's used to me being like authentic and like whatever. But you guys, Fairlie, if you don't know, is our in-house astrologer / space witch / I'm also plugging in. Hold on. Astrologer, space witch, and also a tarot card reader. Her services are available via our website shop, amityvilleapothecary.com. by searching like virtual Fairlie, which is F-A-I-R. Wait, did I do it?
Yeah, Fairlie.
Good Lord. And you could book her astrology or tarot reading. But also, and that's the reason why we're on tonight, is that she just released a new book called Retrograde Ready, which comes with a set of crystals that we are also making available through the Apothecary's website. And so we're here to talk about some planetary action that's just taking place, and I am ready to hear all about it. So, Fairlie, what the hell has been going on?
Well, this is definitely a rough week for astrology because today Venus went retrograde in Gemini, which it hasn't been retrograde in Gemini for quite a while, but it only goes retrograde once every about 18 months, so not even every year. And we have already, Pluto has been retrograde for about a month now. Saturn went retrograde on Sunday, and tomorrow Jupiter goes retrograde. So, welcome to retrograde season, everybody. Let me be the first to welcome you here. But it's not as serious. I mean, it's not as detrimental as people want to make it sound.
I mean, but like, can we blame all these retrogrades for people's crazy ass and foolish behavior on social media right now, including myself?
I mean, I've admittedly tuned out of a lot of the craziness because at this point I just expect it to be happening. Because the world is a crazy place right now. So
Yeah.
while we can't really blame these retrogrades for everything, we can use them as kind of a tool to bounce back from them. And I say them being the craziness. I have a bad thing with pronouns here. So yeah, life is insane right now. The world is a very different place than it's ever been. But retrogrades are actually a really helpful tool, kind of in our like spiritual arsenal to get back on track and really figure out where we want to be and how to get there. They kind of are, if you think about the prefix, they are the like rest period. So
okay, like rest or something, like renew
exactly.
or
So it's not exactly like, I know that I think most people go straight to like Mercury retrograde when they think about retrogrades, because it is the meme of retrogrades.
Yes, it is. It certainly is.
But it also, it does have a reputation for wreaking havoc on literally everything and everyone. And that's for a good reason, because Mercury rules communications and technology. So if you are a person who communicates over technology,
which is everybody. Right,
so yeah,
that's going to affect a lot.
We're going to find some weirdness that happens during Mercury retrograde. But every planet goes retrograde, and it's not necessarily something to be afraid of. It's actually something that we can lean into. So let's talk a little bit about some of that.
Yeah, so what do we start with, since there's so many options? I mean, for some strange reason, I'm like really interested in Jupiter, and I don't know why, maybe because it's like such a big planet.
Well, it is like the biggest planet, but also it's a planet that has a reputation for dealing with money above almost anything. It's definitely a planet that rules expansion and education and also wealth. So if you are at all concerned with any of those things, Jupiter retrograde is definitely something to consider. So what exactly is a retrograde? That's a good question, and let's talk about that first, because that kind of precludes everything else. Retrogrades are actually an optical illusion. And what that means is that because astrology is geocentric, technically, it all has to do with what we see happening in the sky. So a retrograde is when the orbits kind of just mathematically get out of whack, and we end up seeing that planet as if it's going backwards. I promise you it's not actually going backwards, but it's like when you're sitting in a train and the train next to you is going, but you feel like you're going backwards because they're going forward.
Like a split second, like mind mess up where you're like,
yeah, it totally is. But that's what a retrograde is. It's that moment where we're sitting here on this planet looking at another planet as if it's going backwards, and it's not. It's just going differently than we are. So because of that, every single planet goes retrograde at some point. Some go retrograde, more than others. Mercury goes retrograde about 4 times a year. And then others don't go retrograde very often at all. Like Mars only goes retrograde once every 24 months, I believe it is, 22 to 24, depending on the math.
Interesting. I wonder, like, does that have to do with, like, the shape of the orbit, or?
Yeah, it has to do with the shape of the orbit and how far we are from them. So because Mars is very close to us, it goes retrograde much less frequently. The outer planets, Pluto, Uranus, Neptune, Jupiter, Saturn, they go retrograde every single year. And around the same time. So like late spring to, summer. And if you think about it, especially a planet like Saturn, that rules our routines and our structures and the way that we, conduct our lives, our plans ahead. It makes sense that they retrograde during the summer when we're all kind of just free and easy and want some, some relaxation. So it's actually kind of a good thing that it does that. And that's also why, like on Sunday, like I said, Saturn went retrograde this year. So that's going to be retrograde until September. I believe late September. The exact date I can get, but I don't have it in front of me. But so now we're able to kind of take all of the changes that we're seeing in life, that we're being asked to, really adapt to, and put them into play a little bit better. And then every other planet from here is just going to be kind of like adding pieces to the puzzle. Sorry, my cat is screaming in the back.
Cat is screaming. Ruby stole something out of the office. Literally everything is misbehaving. Like I put on the live and like your cat's like, wow. Ruby's like walked into the office and just grabbed something. Whoever's around, the dog has something from the office. It could be rosin for the cello.
So it changes, yeah.
She literally has used rosin before.
Oh no.
It's tree sap, so it's not exactly dangerous, but
it's not great.
Wait, can you not hear me? Letty, can everybody else hear me okay? Or no?
I can hear you okay. I can hear you okay, but I don't know if everyone else is having the same problems.
Let me know.
Okay.
Talk a bit about Saturn. I'm going to be right back. I'm going to see because nobody's answering me about this dog. So I'll be right back.
So to answer the other question, yes, it does change the energies. So basically what a retrograde does is gives us a chance to sound a little farther away than well, now she's very far away because she left. But so basically a retrograde changes the way that we feel the energy. It gives us a chance to kind of double back and reconsider the way that we move through that energy. Dina, the general consensus seemed to be that you were a little muffled. So I don't know.
Is it better now? I think it's better. So it was Palo Santo, FYI.
Well, it's a stick, you know. So anyway, so retrogrades give us a chance to kind of feel the energy a little bit differently. It does kind of change the energy in itself. It will sometimes seem as if the energy isn't moving as quickly, or as if, you know, it's not quite going as direct as it should be. And that's because it's not direct anymore. It's retrograde. So it just, again, gives us that chance to kind of double back and reconsider the way that we're feeling things. So
Saturn, what would be like the themes of the Saturn retrograde? I think you mentioned like integrating all of these new messages or the new ways or whatever, the new, I guess, like macro paradigm that we're all finding ourselves in.
Absolutely. So that's definitely, so because Saturn does rule our routines, our structures, the way that we, you know, handle our very like best selves in the world. When Saturn's retrograde, it just kind of softens the very hard structures in our lives. And it does give us a chance to put new things into play, to try out new things, see where they fit, be a little more relaxed. But so there's an added element here, and I say added element because you wouldn't necessarily need to look into this on your own, but as an astrologer, part of what I do is I examine the symbolism of all of these transits and kind of see how they relate to each other. So one of the tools in the astrological toolbox is called Sabian symbolism. And basically, it assigns an actual image to every single degree of every single sign of the zodiac. And by applying them to the planets at hand, we can kind of see a better idea of what we're looking at as far as the messages of some of these transits. So for Saturn, it starts the retrograde at 1 degree of Aquarius. It just moved into Aquarius before this. And it's the first time it's moved into another sign in 3 years. So it was a really big deal. But the Sabian symbol for 1 degree of Aquarius is, and this gets really flowery, a woman strolling in a garden, unaware that she's being watched by elves. I know, the look on your face there says everything.
I'm trying to like, it's like, what would that feel like? It's like weird sexual small people stalker, or or a curiosity, or like they want to like tie her into the garden. I don't know what elves want to do with you.
Well, so basically, if you there's lots of descriptions for these symbols, but the one that really leapt out at me, and I wrote it down because I really felt like it was worth quoting directly, was that you are tuned into the very things that you deny. So basically, the idea of saying being watched by elves, it's something that we know doesn't exist in the real world, and yet it's there, and yet it's very real, and it has an impact on us. So we are tuned into the things that we deny. These new structures, the way that we want things to be, the ideal, we might be saying to ourselves, well, I can't have that. That doesn't exist in the world that I live in.
Literally, wait. And when did this start happening?
Sunday.
Because, like, literally, I've noticed that people on social media, and I know you said, like, you had to step away because, like, you could lose your shit, that people have really started to even go further into losing their dadgum minds about being in social distancing and living in this paradigm for so long. And people are literally like, screw this, like, I don't want to do it anymore, and let's just see what happens. Like, people are really starting to flip out. And I noticed, like, a lot more sort of this, like, a lot more anger coming out on social media. And I'm like, whoa, like, what is going on? Like, like, right, like, everybody's saying, oh my God, yes, like, literally so much anger. And now that makes a lot of sense. People are pissed off about the elves.
I like that. I like that. The really funny thing is, I feel like I've read at least 5 things today where people mentioned going to parties or hanging out with people. And I was like, wait, aren't we supposed to not be doing that right now? And it was like, wait, did I miss something in the world? But this whole Saturn retrograde, the symbol that we come back to, so we start at 1 degree of Aquarius, which is being watched by elves and being tuned into the things that we deny. However, what we end up retrograding back into is back at the tail end of Capricorn. Remember that Saturn technically rules both of these signs. However, Saturn in Capricorn is very strict and very demanding. And the symbol for 25 degrees of Capricorn, where this transit ends, is a solitary grave in a cornfield. And what that ends up, I know we can take that really literally, but let's not for a second.
I mean, I don't know if, like, that's where I would, like, pick my final repose to be. It's like a little bit Children of the Corn, but anyway.
A little bit. But so basically what this ends up coming to, what this ends up translating to, is revisiting the things that we haven't finished yet. All of the things that we're not quite done yet with, we now have to go back and put it to rest. All of the stuff that's kind of hanging over our heads and not allowing us to move on or develop this new normal or, you know, become the new version of ourselves that we want to be, it's time to finalize that, put it in the ground for good and move on.
And when is that day?
That is September, I want to say 22nd. I could be very wrong on that.
I think actually when Maria was on with Danielle, I think that this might be one of the things that she was referencing to, her interpretation for, like, when the second wave might happen.
Yes. Well, yes. And that is a good point. I'm going to point more towards Mars retrograde on that one. Mars goes retrograde in September. And if you wanted to be a very traditional astrologer, you could look at Mars, and you could look at Mars in Aries specifically and say fever, and definitely a resurgence of, you know, any sort of contagious illness at that point. I don't want to go there because I'd like to think there's an alternate explanation for that. But I really think that the power of astrology is better used to work on yourself and advance your own spirituality and understanding, rather than kind of like unfortunate predictions about things that we don't really want to think about.
I sort of get it. I mean, I see a lot of comments. Gina's like, perfect, just in time for my birthday, girl. Me and Danielle too. We got you. It is what it is.
Yeah.
I'm wondering how, and I don't know, this is probably not something that we can even line up now because I don't even exactly know how many stages of grief there are and where we are in the stages of grief. But I definitely know that, like, we're at the anger part of the grief.
Yeah.
And I don't know what comes after anger. I think Mrs. Rachel said that she works in mental health, so maybe you know how many steps of anger there, how many steps of grief there are, and where we are. But I think people are feeling it. And I know for me, I took, like, a really good look at myself this morning and took anger and denial. I took a real hard look at myself and my trigger, because I was getting all triggered since this weekend in everybody's social media, you know, seeing a lot of denial posts, and you know, it's really funny as someone who is co-owner of a metaphysical shop is going to say like crazy posts about some crazy ass shit, like, and I'm like, what's happening, like, and like in your own brain say like, how do I reconcile like the people that are like my first responder people that I know that are firsthand seeing stuff with maybe some of the things that like might be feeling off with, like not being able to see our loved ones, not being able to grieve with our loved ones, combined with not being able to live in our regular world, and then like getting triggered on social media. So like, how do I take responsibility for my reaction? And I deleted everything political off of Facebook.
There you go. There you go.
Because every time I respond to somebody, I am inviting the same back to me. Every time I engage in putting my views out there, I am then inviting somebody else to put their views back to me. It is a mirror. And I literally forgot for a few days. I'm blaming strep. I don't know. But I was like, nope, girl, you got to stop. And see, like, I'm admitting this to you guys that like, I have to do the work too. That like, I was inviting response that was then continuing me on a trigger train, which I want to coin trigger train. And I'm also going to blame it on Saturn's retrograde and strep throat.
Well, and that's actually a really good lead in to Venus, because that starts today. Okay. And the thing is that Venus in Gemini is usually a very social time. In addition to like relationships and love and money and things like that, Venus also rules a lot of our friendships, a lot of our interpersonal relationships, things like that. So it is, you know, kind of a tough time to be in social distancing, isolation, whatever we're calling this at this point. Because we want to reach out, we want to engage. It's absolutely a very magnetic time of the year. However, all of that said, if we again look at the Sabian symbolism for this particular transit, this becomes a retrograde about looking at where we've internalized other people and how we can kind of cut some of that away in order to, you know, become the best versions of ourselves for ourselves. So it all kind of lines up right in the right time, in the right way. And there are really no coincidences in astrology. So,
wait, so let's say that again. How do we internalize other people?
Yeah. So how, like, think about it. Everyone you've ever met has had some manner of reflecting you back at you, telling you who you are in some way or another, even if it's not who you are, even if it's how you know that you're not. Somehow their opinions get internalized and turn you into a different version of yourself. You know, I think it's pretty common that like when you're with one group of friends, you might notice that you're one way. When you're with another group of friends, you're, well, who are we now that we're mostly alone?
Yeah, that's actually really interesting, because when I took my crystal healer master, whatever, I don't know like what the right word is for it, I read a really long quote, and I still like, I can't figure out what this has to do with crystals, but it's really cool. That basically, Joel, that's too loud. You just can't do the crashing of the wrestlers. It's too loud right now. Okay, when I'm off, you can do it. Sorry. It's okay. It's like it's all hell. It's going loose. Every person that knows you knows a different version of you. So like the you to like your mom, and the you to your husband, and the you to your coworker, and the you to your nail or hair person, and the you to the person that makes your coffee, are all like fractals really of you. Yeah. So like that's sort of like almost like that same thing, is that there are all of these different yous that are like out in the world, based in or rooted in the definition or the feeling or just the perspective of the other.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's, you know, really like, it's really worth thinking about, because now we're not with other people. We are on our own. We're with our families. We're with people that, you know, we probably didn't spend a whole lot of time with before. And now we're rediscovering a whole different way of being ourselves. So this particular Venus retrograde becomes less about, so when it comes to Venus retrograde, a lot of people will instantly freak out and think, oh my God, my boyfriend's going to break up with me. I'm going to lose all my money. I'm going to go into credit card debt, whatever it is that you're afraid of. It's not going to happen, because this retrograde is all about piecing yourself back together to become the whole version of you. Again, talking about Sabian symbolism, the phrase that really stuck out to me for where we begin this retrograde is distorted reflections used to justify the ultimate sellout. So, I know, right? That cut. That totally cut. But where we end up getting back to is the determination to self. It's absolutely being completely committed to our true versions of ourselves with an intensity that we didn't have before. So this is ultimately putting you in the best place.
Yeah, I mean, that, I need you to say that one more time. I just need you to say that one more time, because I think I had a crazy reaction to it. Just say that quote one more time.
Distorted reflections used to justify the ultimate sellout.
All right. This is whacked, because literally my mother and I were having a conversation just 3 hours ago about, yeah, Gina, that quote is I don't know if it's blowing anybody else's brain up, but it literally feels that where we were before this virus started was and my mother and I were just talking about this. My mom was it just sort of seemed like we were really at this fever pitch before this virus hit. A fever pitch of spending and a fever pitch of go, be productive, a fever pitch of buying and working, and stuff was expensive, and running and time, and then it's the break, the big old that old ass train break from the commercial, from the cartoons. Yeah. Put the brakes on, and I think, a wise person once said to me that freighter ships, the freight ships, to turn a freight ship around, it turns by degrees. So it could, when, the big freighter ships that have all the containers on it that bring all the stuff from China, those big ass things. If you want to turn that thing, you can't just turn the steering wheel like you do in a 3-point turn your car. Mm-hmm. It turns very slowly by degrees. And I think again, that's where we are now. But the distortion of ourselves in fitting in to this fever pitch to almost stay on that train, stay on, that's whacked. I could see it in my mind, and I know I'm not explaining it, but that's insane.
No, and I think that's absolutely, it's valid. It's really a valid point to consider, because I think that there were a lot of things that were kind of out of control. And, rather than being able to slow them down and come to a stop, we instead just kind of pulled the brake in a way that, now everything has come to a halt. And again, so astrology is this weird ping pong game where you look for backups from other things. And even when you're not looking for them, they're there. And when you were specifically talking about kind of being off the rails and being out of control spending, all this other stuff, that really comes up with Jupiter retrograde, which starts tomorrow. So Jupiter, like I said, really rules our expansion, our growth. It can rule higher learning. You look to Jupiter when you talk about things like college and education, but you also look at Jupiter when you're talking about wealth and, collecting money and generosity and things like that. You can also look to Jupiter to see how receptive you are to a situation. So Jupiter stations retrograde tomorrow. So stationing, when I say station retrograde, by the way, what it just means is that for a day or so, it actually looks like it's completely stopped moving altogether. And then it will start to move backwards. So when it stations direct, it'll also kind of stop for a second and then begin to move forward. So it stations retrograde tomorrow. And if you look at the symbolism for that transit, what it actually becomes kind of about is turning this reactionary behavior around. Yeah, specifically kind of the idea of allowing yourself to run a little bit wild because you don't agree with something. The phrase that stood out there in that text to me was hiding in opposites and reversals, seeing something very clearly and instead running in the opposite direction.
Which, like, again, I feel like people already started that, like.
Yeah. Well, and that's a really interesting point, is that I think a lot of these retrogrades are not going to come as a shock to anybody's system because we've kind of been sitting with this stagnant energy for a while now. And if anything, going in reverse is going to be a welcome change to standing still.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah, another reason to not feel the retrograde here. But yeah,
just said Jesus with those quotes. Woof. Yeah, I mean, it's like, oh my God, it's like, okay, like, of course it is. Of course it is.
Yeah. You know? Yeah. Well, that's the thing. And again, there are no coincidences in astrology. Everything comes as it needs to in the time that it needs to.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
You know, this is no exception. And this Jupiter retrograde definitely sets us up to get back to being much more direct and goal-oriented, you know, really being able to kind of filter out our own nonsense and get on track with a real plan. Being plan-oriented, I guess, is the better way of putting that. The other thing to remember, too, is that Jupiter is in Capricorn, which it doesn't do very well in. So I feel like I've had this conversation a bunch of times recently, but I'm going to have it again, about essential dignity. And so in traditional astrology, you know that there's a ruler for every sign. There's a planet that rules every sign. And for Jupiter, that is Sagittarius. Traditionally, it also ruled Pisces, but we're not going to go there right now. It got bumped for Neptune. So it definitely rules Sagittarius, which means that it is what we call in exile in Gemini. It's the opposite sign to the sign that it rules. However, there's two more essential dignities, and those are exaltation and fall. Jupiter is exalted in Cancer, basically meaning that it does really, really well with that sign. It aligns very well with the values of Cancer. You know, the peace and the love and the magic that Cancer brings. Jupiter is all about it. The opposing sign to its exaltation is what we call fall, meaning it doesn't like being there. It's too restrictive. It just doesn't get along. Well, that's Capricorn. So Jupiter in Capricorn is not comfortable. It's too restrictive. It doesn't like the rules. It doesn't like being told what to do. And Capricorn has just built all these structures around Jupiter that it doesn't want to be in. So it's already a little bit handicapped. So with this retrograde, we're going to see a lot of those same struggles, those very Capricorn-oriented blockages, start to fall away from Jupiter. Jupiter is actually like the luckiest planet in astrology. You definitely, like, even tense aspects to Jupiter aren't that tense. Jupiter kind of makes a joke about everything. So it's not going to feel like the tragic hardship that retrograde often feels like. It's going to be a little bit more of a gentle ride, but it's still going to lead us to a really important place. So we can't just dismiss it altogether. And in this case, it's very much about getting on track, reining ourselves in, figuring out where we want to be and how to get there. And it all aligns with, you know, Saturn retrograde and other retrogrades that really will be of benefit to us in the end, as long as we lean into it.
Now, I have a question.
Yeah.
Another sort of opposition that I've been seeing a lot of in the social media has been this tension or abrasiveness between the individual liberty and the group.
Yeah.
There's a lot of, it's very abrasive and it's very raw. And I wonder, like, where are we, or what astrologically speaks to that friction of like, the good of the collective versus it's my liberty and I don't want to, because that it almost can be like lit on fire right now.
Yeah, absolutely. So oppositions are, you know, a thing unto themselves in astrology. You know, you'll have opposition as an aspect, you have opposing signs. However, that said, there's also going to be a lot of tension between the individual and the extra, what's the word I'm looking for? The world around us. So every sign, every opposition has to do with the balance between those themes within the self and within the world around you. When you're looking at something like the collective, you tend to look at the like later on down the line signs. Things like beyond Virgo have to do more with the development of the world around us rather than the self. Anything like Virgo and down tends to be more about developing the individual. When it comes to like looking at the themes of an age or an era, you want to look at things like the outer planets, and you want to look at the North Node. And the North Node just changed stations. We went from having the North Node in Cancer for about 1.5 years, 2 years, which is very much about the home and peace and, you know, building this domestic life for yourself. And then it moved into Gemini, which is much more about acquiring knowledge and absorbing information from the world around you. Both of those have a like higher, we would call it like a higher octave, and that would be the opposite sign. You know, for Cancer, that's Capricorn, and that's figuring out how you project yourself into the world around you and the difference that you make within the outside world. The fact that that opposing point is the South Node, that's actually something that becomes kind of a stagnant energy. So right now, what we're looking at is a change of that as well in Sagittarius. So I realize that I'm saying this all in a very complicated way. Basically, what I'm trying to say is that the nodes have just shifted. And now, rather than looking at the home versus the way that we project ourselves professionally, we're looking at absorbing information, taking things in, versus this kind of global citizenship. And believe it or not, astrologically speaking, that global citizenship is something we want to lean away from right now. We need new information. We need to pick up, you know, new ways of doing things and learn new skills. That's that Gemini North Node. We want to lean away from taking it all in and projecting ourselves larger than we really are. So that's kind of the opposition that I think we're seeing there. That's not to say that that's how, you know, it's supposed to be right now.
Yeah, I feel like it's just, I've really sort of like been like, just as I said, like picking up this like this like friction. And I'm like,
yeah,
what's the friction? Like this like opposition, like, oh my God, like caught in betwixt and between. And like literally, I have to tell you something, you guys, like this morning at 8 o'clock in the morning, I woke up and I like felt normal. And I literally was like, I'm going to do research. And I started researching, like once a history major, like you're always a student of history. If you're, I'm like did my undergraduate degree in history. So I'm like a big historian. So I started researching Americans' response to prior pandemics and immunizations. So like smallpox in the early 1900s. And then, guys, I went down this rabbit hole, started researching constitutional case law. From the Supreme
there's a rabbit hole.
I went down like a big ass rabbit hole. Like I was like literally like arming up to drop like case law on people on Facebook until I was like, halt, like what are you doing? Like you can't, it's 8 in the morning and you're like looking up like Supreme Court decisions from the early 1900s on like literally there was a riot in Illinois because the federal government was like like giving people smallpox vaccines, and like this German group of immigrants was throwing rocks at the people, at the officers. So like shit went down in the early 1900s. So like I didn't feel so bad for us that like some of us, and like maybe me included sometimes in this, I'm going to throw myself right in on it, are like acting like dickheads right now. Because like in the early 1900s, like I always feel like we look at like our like forefathers and be like, they had it all together. They didn't act like dickheads. Maybe because like we're not like reading that in the history book, but they also did act like dickheads.
Yeah.
So
I think that it's easy to forget that people are people. Like, human beings are human beings. We're always messy. We're always dickheads. Like, that's just how it goes. So, it's easy to look back and go, but they didn't do that. And it's like, well, we don't know that because we weren't there. So. And also, there wasn't social media back then. So there wasn't something to throw in someone's face when they were a dickhead.
I mean, can you imagine what like the moms group on Facebook would have looked like in 1905 during smallpox?
Yeah, no, that's a mess I'm kind of glad that I missed. Yeah, but that's I think that's the shift that we're going to end up seeing is a lot of like smallness. And I say that in the good sense of the word, the local community versus the global, collective. I think we're going to end up leaning away from that if these energies are anything to take into consideration. Not passing judgment on any astrological transit whatsoever. But I think this is asking us to look a little closer for home for our information, rather than, being concerned with the world at large all the time.
Yeah, I think also I really like the idea of being more local. I really like the idea of keeping our resources and everything sort of tighter knit. And I think we're really starting to do that a little bit more.
Absolutely.
So Valerie is saying what she's seeing is we as humans don't learn. Yeah, well, I mean, that's where we have many, 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 many lifetimes, Valerie.
And you know what? History is a cycle, and if you watch hard enough, you'll see we just do the same things over and over and over. And I am not the historian of mundane astrology that I feel like I should be. And I say mundane astrology being the study of the astrology of the times and events. But I would not be surprised if a lot of what we're seeing now wasn't happening then as well. The last time Uranus was in Taurus, we had the Great Depression and the New Deal ultimately. So Uranus is in Taurus again. Are we really shocked that we're seeing a great threat to global economy?
Right.
Yeah, I don't think so necessarily.
So Lauren asked, do you think the new world is here, or are we researching to prepare us for the new world?
Okay, so as far as the new world is concerned, I think we have a long way to go before we truly get to the new. And I say that because we still have a lot of things in Capricorn. The thing about Capricorn is the key word, if you take nothing else away from the sign, is old. It's all about old ways of doing things, the tried, the true, the methods, all of that. There's a method to Capricorn's madness, and it's all rooted in history. It's ruled by Saturn, the god of time, old. Things are going to be moving into Aquarius. We've already seen Saturn move into Aquarius. It's going to dance back during this retrograde into Capricorn, but by the end of the year, it will be back in Aquarius. Within the next 3 years, we're going to have Pluto in Aquarius. And Pluto, I think, is the planet to watch here. I think Pluto has been the major player this year astrologically, and I think it's a lot to blame for the way that we've seen things play out. But that will be moving into Aquarius in 2023. So soon, not quite, but soon. And then Uranus will move into Gemini in 2026. So again, not quite, but soon. We're going to have this whole new world of air signs to contend with. All of that like intellectuality and the new ideas and the concepts that come with air signs will absolutely be what rules the world within the next 6 years. So we're getting a preview of it now, but it's not here to stay just yet. So, and also think for a second about, the infamous age of Aquarius. I have a whole lot to say about that too, which I'm not going to say right now because that's another hour and a half. But
we should schedule a line for that because I want to have that conversation.
Okay, yeah, we can totally talk about that at some point. But that's kind of what we're leaning towards. It's not here yet, but you know what? If we want to really talk about the concepts that make that a thing, that is on the rise. We're getting there. Hang in. This is just a preview. We're getting a taste of what we need to set up. And I think we're being challenged to step into new roles and really figure out whether or not we fit into this new normal or we're just content to stay comfortable in our old routines. So.
All right. So a lot of comments. I guess there's some Capricorns in the chat. They're like, oh, I'm a Cap rising, you guys. Like,
Yeah.
So no worries. Like, I'm a Cap rising. I don't think that like just because you have some Cap in your chart doesn't mean that like you're like a Dodger stuck in your ways.
No.
Although
no.
I always connected that more with Taurans, but maybe that's just because I have a bad relationship. Anyway, but I do think that there are sort of like these like really evolved versions of each astrological sign.
Absolutely.
So, like, you want to like grow into the most evolved version of the expression of that. Oh my God, Christine, I'm sorry that you're a Taurus and I just made fun of Taurans. It's my ex-husband. Don't take offense. We all have ex-husbands. Maybe not all of you yet, but anyway. So anyway, with that being said, I think there's some really beautiful things about Capricorn energy. There's a lot of things I love about having Cap rising. But I think like the just because we do it this way because it's the way we always do it thing is like really not the best of what Capricorn is, unfortunately.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I saw a comment about Saturn return. And I do think it's worth mentioning that anyone right now who's having any sort of really tough transit through all of this, first of all, I'm sorry. You know, it is what it is. It timed the way that it timed. If you're having your Saturn return right now, so basically, if you don't know what a Saturn return is, it means that Saturn officially comes back to the place where it was when you were born in your chart. There is an exact day for that, but in general, as soon as it hits that sign, you start to feel it. And Saturn becomes this weird wrecking ball of structure. Anything that does not fit into your life gets blown away, and you're kind of forced to figure out where you're actually going. That is the pattern of the Saturn return. It happens every 27 to 30 something years, depending on, the transit. So it's not a super common occurrence, and it is definitely a milestone when it happens. If you're going through that now, first of all, consider that this is part of it. This is part of what's raking away all of those structures that didn't serve you anymore. So it's not like, this is extreme, but it's not like you're going to have to deal with that on top of this. This is part of it. And if this is really the worst of it, then, you're in luck because we're all going through it together. But, don't get too hung up on what you are asking yourself to do right now. I think that there's this weird, concept that we all need to be doing something new and productive here. We don't. It's okay to just be looking at your life right now and understanding that this is new and this is different. You still have another 3 years of Saturn return, and God willing, we will not be dealing with all of this during all 3 years.
Wait, your Saturn return is for 3 friggin' years?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Oh, ew.
Yeah,
I don't really know when my Saturn return was exactly.
It's definitely, there's a mathematical equation for it, but if you think about the most tumultuous point of your late 20s, that was probably your Saturn return. Depending on what sign it was in, those themes are going to be a little bit different, but it's about 3 years of your life, and you come out a very different person than you went into it. I promise. I don't know a single person that has a mild Saturn return.
Married my first time through my Saturn return.
You probably could have. That's a big life. I just moved to a completely different state, changed my major 3 times, and went through 2 different boyfriends. So,
3 times.
Yeah. But yeah, so it's always a crazy thing. And it's okay. So the way that you calculate it, basically you have to look
for pens to write down the math.
Right. Well, so it's not a really clean equation. It has any of these retrogrades also kind of affect it. But basically, you look at the years that Saturn was in the sign that Saturn is in your chart. So right now, it's in Aquarius, meaning anyone with Saturn in Aquarius is kicking off their Saturn return. If you have Saturn in Capricorn, then you're coming to the tail end of it. The rest of it is going to be roughly 27 to 30 years, depending on, what sign it is. And the best way to do that is just to run your birth date through a calculator and see. But, you know, there's really no good clean equations with astrology. We used to have books like this thick called ephemeris, and you'd actually have to comb through them and mark down the degrees that people had things in. Now we have computer programs. So head over to astro.com and run it through a calculator. So
it says there's calculators online.
There are.
So I know what we'll all be doing after this live. But before we go, I just want to check so we have like another 10 minutes, and I did want to talk about your book.
Yes.
Because there's a lot of great tools in your book with crystals to go with them to support the energy of what these retrogrades are really asking us to focus so we can do the work, right? What we're always saying, do the work to make sure you come through through these various retrogrades becoming again the most highly evolved the most highly evolved version of yourself. So if you go through all this stuff, and like some people are going to do that, where they're just going to stick their freaking heads in the sand and they're just going to be like, rah, and they're not going to analyze, they're not going to hold the mirror up, and they're not going to care, then like whatever, like I don't know what to say about them. Sorry, dude. Like, they're going to be like shitty after this. I don't really know, whatever. Not our problem. We can only control ourselves.
Yes.
We can control ourselves and try and work through the energies and how to support it. And what are these retrogrades asking us to look at internally, and how do we do that integrative work to move forward? All right. You wrote it though. So
all of the stuff that I talked about tonight, as far as like the themes and the symbols and all of that, I got much more concise in my book and really gave you all the information you need to know about what these transits are going to be about. And then some questions to really think and reflect on to get really clear on what it means to you. And I recognize that some of them are kind of tough questions, you know, questions that you probably don't want to answer for yourself because they require a level of honesty and transparency that most of us don't want to have.
All right, wait, pause.
Yeah.
If a question starts to bring up shame, thoughts of shame, those are definitely the things that you need to be writing about and bringing to light.
Absolutely.
Shame loves to insulate all the shit that needs to come up.
Yes.
So if you start to hit shame and you're like, I don't want to really write about this because I don't even want to admit it to myself that I have these types of feelings, like you are literally heading in the right direction.
Yes. And this is the year for shadow integration. If you have any inclination to get deep, you got to do it. Like, this is the year for introspection and to take all of that shame and all of that guilt and just get rid of it. Take it back inside and understand that, you know what? You're human. It's okay. And you're better and bigger now. So get real, get honest, and work on it. There's nothing about you to be that afraid of. And it's only going to eat away at you more if you let it fester. So now's the time to face it.
So Gina said that she's been exhausted looking at all of her shadows and she struggles with the questions. You know what I literally just got into my head right now? Like, the thought that I had in my head, this is like literally not trying to make light of the situation, but like, don't worry about bringing light to your shadow and doing that work and like those shame feelings and working through it, because honestly, at the end of the day, I promise you, like, you're not Hitler. So like, you're not going to get to that person. So like, think about that at least. Like, at least like you're not like that disgusting of a
And you know what? Better to do it now while you're young and here and on this earth than have to deal with it later on down the line. You know, you don't want to be like 70 years old dealing with these shadow problems, because that's not pretty.
No, I mean, I have a couple of people in my life that definitely have shadow issues, and like, unfortunately, the universe or God or source or whatever conspires to keep bringing us these lessons, to do this integration, to bring to light what needs to be integrated. And if we don't, we're going to keep smacking our head about. And like when I see sort of like Fairlie said, older people with this sort of outstanding work that needs to be done, there's a level of desperation in the untimely realization that their time is short in this incarnation, whatever you believe, or single carnation, whatever. That's rough, right? Fairly, like you don't want to see that in somebody.
And you know what? It's not, nothing in you is that scary that you can't handle it now. It's the fact of the matter. You know, we feel very differently about ourselves than other people feel about us. And sometimes it's helpful to approach it from, you know, if I know it's difficult, but approach it from a more neutral standpoint. Look at yourself like someone you actually love and be a little bit gentle, you know. There's a lot of prompts that I know I gave in my book that get really, really, really raw. But it's what you need to do to integrate these lessons and move forward stronger. Because the sooner you face it, the better you are. And like I said, Pluto was a major player planet this year, and that's what Pluto is all about, is the shadow integration and getting real with yourself. So do it now, do the work, and we're poised for a much better reality very, very soon. Very, very soon.
Fairly, what was that book you told me to buy? I think it's coming this week.
Oh yeah, that's Existential Kink. That's Carolyn Elliott. I'm obsessed with her.
I know. I feel like once I get that, I have to see who the publisher is, because I feel like maybe that should be our next book club.
It's
like a year of shadow work. Maybe we should do that.
It is. It's very good. I highly recommend it. Her courses were fantastic, and now she has done all her best techniques in a book that you can buy on Amazon for like $11.
So you guys, I'm getting it. I think it's like coming tomorrow. I'm super stoked because like Fairlie recommended it and I like bought it like right away. So I was like, yay. Does it have, yes.
Yes.
So the book has the actual dates of the retrograde.
I also gave some other dates for transits that are of note. So like, for example, this Venus retrograde happens to square Neptune like almost the whole time. So that also plays into it. I mentioned those in the book as well. And those also went into the consideration of the prompts and also the crystal selection. You know, you went really deep with these. These were not just like surface level planetary suggestions.
No, the crystal suggestion was the crystals that we paired with these retrogrades was it took me like a minute. I was like, you know, someone warned me about triggers in the book, and he not fairly
in Existential Kink. You know what? I have mixed feelings about that in general, because I think that it's a book about shadow integration. It's about getting really raw with yourself and facing some of the things that you might be triggered by. So you have to approach it from that place. You know, if you are put off by facing darkness in those forms, then it's probably not for you. But, you know, Carolyn Elliott comes from a background of abuse and, you know, drug usage and all that other stuff. So she mentions that this helped her get through those things, and she does mention them. So if those are problems for you, then it's probably not for you. But it's all in the name of growth. She doesn't harp on it for the sake of harping on it. You know, that's what that is. So yeah, if that's not for you, then maybe pass on it. But it's for the good. It's called Existential Kink. Existential, I'm not even going to try to spell without looking at a word. Kink, K-N-I-K. But it's a fascinating technique, and I'm obsessed.
Yeah, I'm getting it. I'm getting it this week because there's definitely still some healing work that I need to do that I've been not focusing on. So, you know, shoemakers, kids don't have shoes. And so I am going to read it, and I'll do like a quick scan, and we'll see. Like maybe we'll decide if that's something that we want to approach for book club. We will see. We are at the 1 minute countdown before we get the whole heave-ho off of Instagram. You guys, Fairlie's book, Retrograde Ready, is available on our website as well as her website. Our website is shop.amityvilleapothecary.com. Fairlie, what's yours?
It's my name, fairlietheta.com.
Fairlietheta.com. It's $40 for the book with the crystal set. The book will be sent to you in digital form. The crystals will be mailed to you for free, of course. And we would love for you to have it and let us know what you think.
Yeah.
Don't forget also, if you would love to get one of Fairlie's astrology services, she's available online. So just check out our website and you could book her for time, for tarot, and for astrological consults as well. Fairlie, as always, I learned so much every single time I talk to you. Thank you so much. It's been an awesome night. You guys be safe.
Thank you for having me.
Soon.
Bye.
Bye.